I am sure that during the previous years you've had an experience similar to this. You walk into your favorite fast food joint or reach for your favorite brand of cereal at your nearest grocery store. Times are hard, everything seems to be increasing in price every month to the point where, if you have to be honest with yourself, you would not be able to answer exactly what it is the correct price for the meal that you're purchasing. You head to the till, take your smartphone out to pay, expecting the habitual pain, and wow, is it actually a fair price? Fair for the time, understand. Your grandpa would still hit you with a stick to pay that much for a burger or some cereal, but hey, welcome to 2026. Still, something is fishy. Is McDonald's your friend? Is Captain Crunch on your side of capitalism? Obviously, the answer is no. And you discover this when you start munching on your burger or digging into your cereal, only to find out that they last very little. And I mean very little. What is happening here? You, my friend, have become a victim of shrinkflation, the process by which companies minimize the amount or size of the product without changing the price. Pay the same, get less. And there we leave you, feeling like an idiot and still hungry. So back in the years where prices were not in an upward trend that would make the Weimar Republic blush, politicians that wanted to display their proximity to the working people would ask their opponent in a debate if they could name the price of a carton of milk or a dozen of eggs. Don't worry, we're not in Weimar hyperinflation just yet, but the situation was more powerful in a time where there existed some degree of price stability. It became a bit of a shorthand way to out and out of touch elite in both sides of the aisle. From George Bush to Joe Biden and most recently JD Vance have been caught by this clever ruse. But let me tell you, what is the price of a dozen eggs or a carton of milk? The reality is that I find it complicated to answer. Probably more than you think, definitely more than it should, but a number to the dollar? That I could not answer. It would be a guess. And I believe that that is consequence of nearly 10 years of high inflation. That is what the persistent rising of prices would do to a brain. You feel the rise in prices, God knows your wallet thins faster, and you go out less, but the idea of prices as a thing that is fixed enough for a question like that to carry the same meaning as it used to, I think that's gone. To put an example, the price per dozen of eggs at Walmart rose from about $3 in 2015 to nearly $7 in 2025. It would then crash to $2 again in 2026, but the point about price volatility stands. Ask yourself honestly, if normal people like you or I would struggle to tell the price of eggs, what does it say that a rich guy running for president cannot keep up? Very little, I think. And that is the danger of untamed inflation. In a recent study by Informs, a data gatherer and market research firm, it was revealed that consumers are more likely to notice price hikes over the reduction on the size or amount of a product. Their research also showed that over the past year, there had been a persistent effort on the side of companies to come up with clever ways to undercut consumers and get away with offering less than they used to with a similar price. The research on shrinkflation is still a budding science, since price increases are more easily monitored than exactly how many Pringles are in a can, but we have all felt it. Sometimes it's KFC cutting the size of each piece of chicken by nearly half, according to Consumer Reports, or Hershey's having notoriously reduced the weight of their variety pack. And yes, we might say that these are dirty tricks or consumer unfriendly moves, but the reality is that this is a growing economic trend that is expressing in many different ways across the economy, and is having quite significant effects in the consumer base. It might be a dimple at the end of a can of peanuts, or the ever-expanding air inside of a bag of chips threatening to do away with every last bit of potato. But the conclusion is the same. There are companies trying to maintain prices but undercut the density of the product. Generally speaking, from an economic perspective, the first effect that this has is the extending of the effects of an inflationary environment way past their due date. For example, 2025 was a year of high inflationary pressures, but in 2026, things have calmed down quite a bit. But you would not be able to tell if you ask most people. Why? because of strategies like shrinkflation, which keep prices but reduce the amount of purchased, essentially leading to a similar effect in the economy. To get a similar amount, you must pay more. High inflation tends to lead to a multitude of issues, especially when prolonged during time. High prices lead to lower spending, and they charge a psychological toll on a middle class for whom their wages have not kept up, meaning even less money remaining after the month is over, even if they're frugal with their spending. And we are not talking about luxury. Expensive brands might suffer, but the reality is that bread, cereals, milk, eggs, and the like are the kind of things that people would have to buy no matter why. Also referred to as price inelastic goods. To understand the difference between price inelastic goods, think of how one would react if every Ford car was priced double of the average of the industry. You would simply buy another car type. But if eggs and milk cost double, then the other alternative is to eat fewer eggs and milk. But since they are a staple of most diets, and frankly, groceries people should not have to do without, then it is savings that suffers. And let me be clear to all of those who would say that grocery purchasing is a lost art, that the modern middle class has forgotten. This is not true if staples of any Western diets are now 3 or 4 times the price. Sure, if a branded item is more expensive, then go for the unbranded one. That is sound reasoning. But what if the unbranded one is also expensive? What is the great advice then? Now, it's important to indicate that even if they are related, shrinkflation and inflation are not the same. Inflation is a complex economic effect, product of a currency losing its value over time due to an increase in the amount of money in the system. This generally occurs when a central bank like the Fed, for example, prints money. To put it in simple terms, if in an economy with $10 in the system, an apple costs $1, how much does the apple cost in an economy with $20 in the system? Well, economists would answer $2. Not because the apple is any dearer or better, but because the thing you pay with is lesser. You want to know how bad inflation is? Think about the fact that 30% of all dollars in existence today were printed in between 2020 and now. Think about that. The dollar exists in some form or another for over 2 centuries, and in 6 years, we increased the amount of money in the system by 30%. Now that is inflation. But shrinkflation is different. It has its roots on trickery that is much older than any singular currency. Products get cut with lesser substances and sold as if they were pure. Bread and minced meat and many other products are mixed with, for example, cheaper cuts than advertised or worse flour, only to marginally raise prices. The effects on the consumer are the same as inflation. For a given amount of chips or chicken or chocolate, you pay more. Be it because the dollar is more abundant or because the producers are shrinking their products. But with one fundamental difference. While inflation affects the entire economy, for even if the producers increase their prices, their production costs also raise, shrinkflation only affects the demand side of the economy. So, why do they do it? Is it because companies are evil and cannot fathom the possibility of giving us more than the exact minimum amount that we would pay for? Well, yes, but also the incentives are all wrong and shrinkflation might become a new normal. Okay, so we have indicated that prices raise product of economic tendencies. We know that the dollar is weaker due in part to overprinting, which makes prices rise. But there is still a part on this whole setup that does not experience the adequate increase, and that is wages. It would stand to reason that if you are equally as productive in 2025 as you were in 2024, the devaluing of the dollar would come with a raise. You are equally as hardworking, and the dollar value of your work should increase commensurate to the depreciation of the currency. But this does not happen. Listen, maybe it's because contracts stipulate generally a close salary. Maybe because most people are part of a weak union or none at all. But the fact is that the cost of living increases product of inflation, but your wages does not. When we consider that with the fact that every single increase in price would lead to lower demand, then a point will be reached when increasing prices of goods reach their peak. Anything more, and people would struggle to pay the asked price. For price inelastic goods, that is. If you want things that cannot be shrunk, then, well, pay $6 for 12 eggs. So the alternative then becomes simply the reduction of the portion. We experience it as a shrinking of the product we bought a few months ago for the same price, but from an economic perspective, it's not shrinkflation at all, it's inflation of a lesser product. Think of a box of, say, 10 donuts that cost, let's say, $20. If tomorrow that box of 10 donuts costs 22, then we say that the price has increased 10%. But if we are sold 8 donuts for $20, then we say it's shrinkflation. Except it is just the company selling you a lesser product, 8 donuts are always worse than 10, for a higher price. And so we are back at the idea of inflation and how products that cannot be shrunk increase in price, while things that can be shrunk are instead substituted for lesser versions of themselves and given the same label. It's a trick as old as time. You must remember, even if your bones tell you that shrinkflation is what you're witnessing, the reality is that you're just being sold something lesser for an expensive price. It is complicated for some products, but perhaps thinking in price per ounce or price per gram is a better way of understanding that it is all inflation of prices rather than reduction of amount. If I promised you a new Harley Davidson and I brought you a bike missing one wheel, you would not say I shrunk your Harley, you would say that I gave you something lesser. And this is the same. It says Pringles on the can, but there are 20% fewer chips inside, so it's a lesser product, no matter if I charge you the same as I did yesterday for the full set. So, what do you think? What are the worst examples of shrinkflation that you've seen? Comment down below and consider subscribing. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next week.